When we think about bodybuilding, it's impossible not to bring up the so-called golden era. It goes way beyond nostalgia or black and white photos. That period left a deep mark on the sport, creating standards that still captivate athletes, fans, and even people who've never set foot in a gym. But why we keep talking about it? And why do physiques from decades ago remain iconic, even with all the breakthroughs in sports science and modern supplements? Names like Arnold Schwarzenegger, Zane, and Mike Mincer weren't just champions. They became symbols of an almost artistic pursuit of symmetry, proportion, and physical beauty. It wasn't just about being huge, it was about being balanced, aesthetic, and inspiring. It was a philosophy that placed looks above everything else, as if these guys were sculpting their bodies with the same dedication a classical artist would pour into a marble statue. Now here we are in 2025, in the age of social media, influencers and contests where sheer size is king. And yet, there's this growing nostalgia, almost a craving for the values of the golden era. It's like after pushing the limits of mass for so long, we're circling back to a fundamental question. What's the real ideal physique? Is it the biggest body or the most beautiful one? The heaviest guy on stage or the most symmetrical? This video is an invitation to look beyond the muscle and think about what truly makes a physique impressive. We're diving into the mindset that guided that generation, the training styles that built legends, the old-school diets that worked long before fancy tech and science-based meal plans, and the passion that made every workout feel like a mission. And of course, we'll explore what the golden era still has to teach anyone chasing a strong, healthy, and inspiring body today. Back in the golden era, physiques weren't just trained. They were sculpted like living works of art. Athletes saw their bodies as a reflection of beauty, discipline, and balance, often drawing inspiration straight from ancient Greek statues. They didn't just want size. They wanted harmony. They wanted their physiques to represent that timeless ideal of physical perfection, like they'd stepped off a pedestal in some forgotten temple. That ideal meant a small waist, wide shoulders, a full chest, strong arms, a tapered V-shaped back, and perfectly balanced calves. Everything had to flow. One muscle couldn't overpower another. The goal was for the body, from any angle, to show both power and elegance. Even their posing routines were crafted with precision, almost like muscle ballet. And speaking of posing, it really was an art. Every movement on stage was calculated to highlight strengths and hide flaws. Posture, transitions, facial expression, even breathing, all part of the performance. For guys like Zane or Ed Corney, posing was more than flexing, it was storytelling. The stage wasn't just about mass, it was about impact. Visual presence mattered just as much. The roots of bodybuilding actually go way further back than Arnold or the bright lights of the Olympia. At the end of the 19th century, what they called physical culture started as a form of public entertainment. It wasn't unusual to see men lifting stones, bells, or primitive dumbbells at circuses and theater shows. At that point, it wasn't really about muscle aesthetics yet, it was more about raw strength and showmanship. But the seed of modern bodybuilding had been planted. One of the most important figures from that time was Eugen Sandow. He's often called the father of modern bodybuilding, and for good reason. He was the first to promote a sculpted, symmetrical body as the masculine ideal. In 1901, Sandow organized the Great Competition in London, the first real bodybuilding contest with clear aesthetic criteria. That event kicked off the shift from brute strength to the artistic side of physique development. Over the following decades, bodybuilding gradually evolved. In 1939, the Mr. America contest was born, one of the first major events focused strictly on physique. The first winner, John Grimek, perfectly embodied the new vision: strength, aesthetics, and heroic posture. That era, known as the Silver Era, made room for more refined physiques and more structured training approaches. Then, in the 1940s, the sport really found its footing with the creation of two major organizations: NABA, the National Amateur Bodybuilders Association, and the IFBB, International Federation of Bodybuilding and Fitness. With them, bodybuilding got real structure, rules, international events and a professional path. Contests like Mr. Universe and eventually Mr. Olympia created the perfect setup for the explosion that would come next. It was in the 1960s, 70s, and early 80s that everything changed. With the rise of names like Larry Scott, Sergio Oliva, and of course Arnold Schwarzenegger, bodybuilding became more than just a sport. It became a cultural phenomenon. Arnold, with his stage presence and Hollywood charisma, went far beyond competitions and helped introduce bodybuilding to the entire world. Movies like Pumping Iron pulled back the curtain on behind-the-scenes prep and made these athletes relatable in the eyes of the public. That era, known as the Golden Era, was the peak of classic aesthetics and admiration for a well-built physique. Gyms started popping up everywhere, bodybuilding magazines filled the newsstands, and the fitness lifestyle began stepping into the spotlight. The sport was no longer just a niche. It started influencing fashion, behavior, and even art. It was the start of a true muscle revolution. But over the years, bodybuilding took a different path. One focused more and more on extreme size. The pursuit of refined aesthetics, symmetry, and harmony gave way to a new goal: to be the biggest of all. What was once a form of sculpting the human body turned into a full-on arms race for muscle mass, often at the expense of proportion and visual appeal. This was the beginning of a new era, more intense, more controversial, and undeniably more extreme. This shift was fueled by major advances in pharmacology. The introduction of more powerful anabolic steroids, human growth hormone, HGH, and insulin completely changed the game. Athletes were now able to pack on muscle like never before. But those gains came with consequences. Physique started looking less natural, midsections became bloated, commonly called GH guts, and the classic lines were broken. The new standard was all about massive lats, monstrous quads, and dense traps, even if it meant sacrificing overall balance. The name most associated with this mass era is, without question, Ronnie Coleman. An 8-time Mr. Olympia champ, Ronnie took the concept of hypertrophy to the absolute limit. His body looked like something straight out of sci-fi lab. Freakish size, insane definition, and superhuman strength. To many, he's the greatest bodybuilder of all time. To others, he marks the point where the sport crossed the line from aesthetic to freakish. Either way, you can't talk about bodybuilding's evolution without talking about Ronnie. But after years of extreme, size dominating the stage, and overshadowing symmetry and beauty, something began to shift. Classic aesthetics, once seen as outdated, started making a comeback in the hearts of both athletes and fans. What seemed buried under the mass monster era resurfaced with full force in 2016 when a brand new division was introduced to bring back the values of the Golden Era: Classic Physique. It was a clear response to the collective nostalgia for balanced, beautiful, and timeless physiques. That new division was designed with one goal in mind: to bring back the charm of the 70s physiques, but with the quality and knowledge of the modern era. Classic physique competitors aren't judged by sheer size, but by symmetry, definition, tight waists, and of course, overall visual appeal. Their poses are inspired by legends like Zane, Serge Nubret, and Ed Corney, and each athlete is expected to understand the importance of elegance, fluidity, and stage presence. The impact was instant. In no time, Classic Physique became one of the most beloved divisions in the sport. Fans reconnected with the essence of bodybuilding and started following new stars like Chris Bumstead, the face of this new era. Bumstead represents the perfect blend of genetics, discipline, and respect for tradition. With a look straight out of the 1970s, he helped bring the classic style back into the spotlight for an entirely new generation. The division's success also reveals something deeper. People still admire what's harmonious. Even with all the scientific and pharmacological tools available to build massive physiques, the look that truly captures hearts is the one that feels attainable, that reminds us of an older, timeless ideal of physical perfection. The tight waist, broad shoulders, V-taper, and flawless symmetry tap into something primal, our sense of beauty. More than just a competitive category, Classic Physique has become a cultural movement within bodybuilding. It opened the door for athletes who don't want to become monsters, but still want to compete with dignity, stay healthy, and prioritize aesthetics. It's also inspired everyday lifters to pursue more natural physiques, far from the extremes and closer to what we used to see on the covers of Golden Era magazines. Back in the golden era of bodybuilding, training wasn't just about following a program written by some expert. It was a personal journey, almost spiritual, where each athlete learned directly from their own body. There weren't tons of studies, set protocols, or training apps. What they had was instinct, sweat, and an insane drive to improve. Workouts went on for hours and pushed the body to the edge. Today, people might call that overtraining. Back then, it was just what you had to do to grow. Training revolved around heavy compound movements with free weights. We're talking squats, deadlifts, bench press, rows, dips, and military press. Absolute staples in every serious lifter's routine. No fancy machines, no high-tech gear, just raw iron and real effort. And that took more than just physical strength. It demanded laser focus and serious mental toughness. Another huge thing was training volume. Guys would hit dozens of sets per muscle group, multiple times a week. The idea was simple. Hammer the muscle until it had no choice but to grow. And even without modern recovery tools, they adapted. They learned to listen to their bodies the hard way, testing combinations, adjusting weights, and trusting the feedback their muscles gave them. Take Arnold Schwarzenegger, for example. The guy trained twice a day, 6 days a week. When he realized his calves were lagging, he made it his mission to destroy them in every session until they became one of his best body parts. Tom Platz, another legend, was known for squat sessions that lasted literal hours. This kind of extreme effort was seen as a badge of honor, not recklessness like it might be labeled today. There was no fear of experimenting. These guys were walking science experiments. They tried everything, made up routines, swapped ideas with each other, and learned by doing. It was a community where knowledge was passed around through experience, not academic papers. That created a culture of hands-on learning and constant evolution, even without all the data and gadgets we have now. And when it came to nutrition during the golden era, what stands out most is how simple it all was. No crazy meal plans, no complicated protocols, no mountains of supplements. Just real food. Lean red meat, chicken, whole eggs, cottage cheese. That was the daily foundation. These foods gave them everything they needed. High-quality protein, good fats, and essential nutrients to fuel those brutal training sessions and support recovery. They preferred solid meals, made in the kitchen, not in a lab. Most of them saw supplements as just that, supplements, not the foundation of their nutrition. They might have used basic vitamins, some protein powder, maybe a few amino acids, but that was it. The real focus was always on the plate, eating regularly in the right amounts, and staying consistent over weeks, months, and years. It was a lifestyle built on routine and discipline, not shortcuts. Take whole eggs, for example. They weren't just about the egg whites. The yolk was a prized source of energy and healthy fats. Red meat wasn't just a protein source. It was believed to boost strength and endurance, which were non-negotiable for those grueling sessions. Chicken came right after, along with cottage cheese, milk, and even beef liver in some diets. They also stayed away from too many refined carbs. Instead, they went for moderate portions of rice, potatoes, and veggies. The goal was to keep the body functional, strong, lean, and ready to train hard. And even without macro counting or carb cycling, they still nailed it most of the time. Their bodies responded because training, rest, and nutrition were all in sync. Today, in a world of hyper-personalized diets and shelves overflowing with supplements, it's kind of wild to realize how these old-school athletes got insane results with simple, no-nonsense eating. It just proves that more important than having the best whey protein or the flashiest pre-workout is staying consistent. Eating right, training hard, and repeating that formula with discipline for years. That was the real secret. Back then, gyms weren't the sleek, high-tech temples we know today. They were gritty, raw places, concrete floors, cast iron dumbbells, heavy bars, and maybe a couple of basic machines. But it was in those no-frill spaces that some of the most iconic physiques of all time were built. No luxury, no comfort, just iron, sweat, and pure drive. And maybe that's exactly why the results were so extraordinary. The lack of equipment forced athletes to focus on the essentials: big, compound lifts, barbell squats, deadlifts, flat bench, pull-ups, dips. These were the backbone of their routines. These exercises hit multiple muscle groups at once, demanded stability and coordination, and delivered real gains in strength and size. Nothing beats the impact of lifting free weights with your own body as the only machine. With fewer machines around to assist the movement, the body had to do more of the work, and that meant greater muscle activation and better overall development. There was no hiding behind guided machines. Execution relied entirely on the athlete's control, which not only made training more effective, but also built insane mind-muscle connection. Every session was a physical and mental lesson. Each athlete had to figure out what worked best for them. No pre-made spreadsheets, no fancy apps. The only way forward was to test, tweak, and repeat. During the golden era, bodybuilding stepped out from backstage and into the public imagination. Athletes stopped being just competitors. They became cultural icons. They influenced not only other athletes, but also fashion, cinema, and the global idea of the ideal physique. Muscular aesthetics, once seen as eccentric, became a symbol of strength, health, and discipline. It was the beginning of a transformation that would take the sport far beyond the gym walls. Arnold Schwarzenegger is the ultimate example of that shift. His leap from the stage to Hollywood didn't just skyrocket his career, it helped take bodybuilding worldwide. Movies like Conan the Barbarian and The Terminator introduced the bodybuilder look to the mainstream, making millions of people admire that physique, even if they'd never heard of Mr. Olympia. Arnold wasn't just strong. He was magnetic, showing up in commercials, interviews, health campaigns, and even politics. But Arnold wasn't alone. Other athletes from that era started appearing in ads, fashion magazines, and public events too. The fitness lifestyle, clean eating, and hard training began to be seen as something admirable, even aspirational. Suddenly, it wasn't weird to see a jacked guy on the cover of a popular magazine. These athletes started setting trends, even in behavior, showing that discipline and self-control could be ways of life. Beyond the visual impact, golden era athletes proved that you could make a living off your physique, not just as competitors, but as personal brands. Many of them opened gyms, wrote books, gave seminars, and started businesses in health and fitness. That entrepreneurial mindset laid the foundation for what we now call fitness marketing. They were the first to realize that the body itself could be a product, and there was a hungry audience ready to buy into it. Then came social media, and it changed the bodybuilding scene forever. What used to be limited to magazines, VHS tapes, and live events became accessible to anyone with a smartphone. YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, they turned into global stages where workouts, diets, and lifestyles are broadcast in real time. It's never been easier to access the fitness world, but it's also never been easier to get lost in it. The digital age brought inspiration, but also illusion. On one hand, there's no denying the positive power of these platforms. Athletes and coaches now have a chance to reach millions, share knowledge, and motivate people who are just starting out. Watching someone's real transformation, following their ups and downs, it can spark change in anyone. Plenty of people find encouragement and reliable info online that they'd never had before. In fact, the golden era spirit has been reignited by creators who honor the past and revive its core values. On the other hand, trouble starts when the content loses its authenticity. Edited photos, perfect lighting, filters, and impossible bodies create distorted expectations. What's marketed as natural often involves hidden tools, hormones, surgeries, and digital manipulation. The result? A toxic loop of comparison, where the average gym goer feels like they're falling short, even when they're making real progress. The golden era wasn't perfect, but it was real. Athletes back then weren't chasing instant fame or likes on social media. They were chasing personal excellence, pride on the stage, and a physique that inspired. Not because it was outrageous, but because it was beautiful. And honestly, that's a powerful reminder. Maybe the key to building your ideal body isn't to complicate things, but to go back to basics and do them right. While today's fitness world is split between extremes, natural versus enhanced, aesthetic versus freakish, the Golden Era's philosophy still stands like a lighthouse in the fog. It reminds us to tune in to our bodies, be patient with progress, and put intention into every rep. Train with purpose, eat with intention, and live with consistency. Sounds simple? That's exactly why it works. What's really fascinating is that even with all the new trends out there, the physiques that inspire us the most today are the same ones that inspired people back in the 70s. And that just proves one thing: time doesn't weaken what's authentic. It only makes it more valuable. The pursuit of classic aesthetics is still alive because it taps into something deeply human: the desire for balance. Strength with beauty, size with harmony, hard training with a clear purpose. So now the question is in your hands. What kind of physique do you want to build? One that impresses for a few seconds, or one that inspires for a lifetime? A body that demands extreme sacrifices but fades fast, or one that reflects your identity, your story, your evolution? The choices you make today are shaping that path. And if you've made it this far, it's probably because the fire of the golden era still burns somewhere inside you. Maybe all it needed was a little spark to come alive again. So why not carry that spirit with you? Whatever your goal is, never lose the essence. Never lose the passion. And never lose the joy of watching your own body transform. Day after day, set after set, with honesty and heart. Now tell me in the comments, which type of physique inspires you more, the classic or the modern? And why? I'd love to hear your take. If this video motivated you in any way, drop a like, share it with that friend who needs to reconnect with the roots of bodybuilding, and of course, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what's coming next. Until next time, and remember, never stop evolving.